I was going to help you. So this literally happened 30 minutes ago. I'm driving to work and it's about 3:30 a.m. I take 3 different routes to work, but I've been taking the same one for a while since there's construction everywhere else. I'm driving down this road and on either side of the road is all subdivisions. I'm listening to a podcast, trying to keep myself awake until I can go get some coffee. I start getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach, but I thought it was my body telling me to get some caffeine and maybe something to eat. I ignore it and continue driving. All of a sudden this guy starts running out in the middle of the road. I barely see him since he is wearing dark clothes. I managed to slow down and I noticed he looked pretty freaked out. Now I listen to a lot of creepy podcasts ranging from true crime to supernatural. I know the rules to stay safe in situations. I wish I listened to them today. I normally wouldn't stop, but I knew that if something happened to me I would want someone to stop. So I did. Luckily I kept my car running and I rolled my window down a little bit just so I can talk to this guy. I asked him if he was okay and he started freaking out, saying someone was trying to kill him. He told me his dog was ripped apart in his front lawn and he tried to pick the remains up to try and bury it, but he saw a man running after him with a knife. He said he thought it was probably a coyote or something, so he wasn't suspicious, but he ran off when he saw this man. Now I was pretty freaked out, but I noticed something. Yet it was dark, but with the lights on inside my car and the lights that were on out front of the subdivisions I could see pretty well. He was younger, about mid-30s, dark black hair and had green eyes. He was wearing a hunter's jacket and jeans. I live in Idaho, so hunter's jackets is pretty normal attire. What I noticed, however, there was no blood or fur anywhere on him. I asked him why there wasn't any blood on him and his whole demeanor changed. It was like turning off the switch. My blood went cold. He stared at me for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a couple seconds. What came out of his mouth next was the final straw for me. His whole body relaxed. He stopped shaking and he leaned closer towards my window and smiled at me. It was a twisted type of smile, and his eyes went dark. He took a deep breath and said, "I was going to help you." He then started cackling and tried to open my car door, and I immediately rolled up the window, put my car in drive and sped off down the road, not stopping for anything. Once I finally got to work I started crying. I still have 10 minutes before I have to go in and honestly I'm terrified to get out of my car. To the guy that wanted to help me, let's not meet ever again. Cannibal at the pet store. A few years ago I worked at a small local pet store during college. This store specializes in saltwater fish and reptiles in particular, so it wasn't too odd to have newbie reptile or aquarium people or people looking to just learn some more before actually getting a little companion. About a year into me working there, this one man would come in and start asking questions about the bearded dragons in particular. I humored him the first couple times he came in and answered his questions for an hour and a half to 2 hours each time he came in, but then he just kept coming in, not buying anything, not looking at other animals, refused to talk to my other coworkers standing right next to me. He was definitely a dude with a creepy vibe, but after about the third time of this guy coming in and questioning me about bearded dragon mating habits for an hour, we all started getting uncomfortable. He knew my schedule because we were such a small store. I would call my friends and tell them to come hang at the shop while he was there because he was just so persistent about talking to me, and only about the bearded dragons with the occasional "do you have a boyfriend" or pickup line. I told him I wasn't interested each time and told him I had a boyfriend, even though I didn't. At first we were all pretty forgiving, chalking it up to social awkwardness, but it started getting scary when he'd come in, look for me, not find me but find my car and just hang out outside the shop. My boss manager started telling me to hide out in our back room when he'd come in. My friends were weirded out. I was getting uncomfortable around him, and my coworkers were actively trying to curb his enthusiasm for coming in. I ended up quitting that job. Around a month later I'm watching the news with my dad, and we were in for a surprise. This same guy had been escorted off his ex's property in a local town by police, came back to the house the same night and murdered her. When she didn't show up for work, her coworkers called for a welfare check. Police get there, he answers the door and tells them his name is Zeus. It most definitely was not his real name. Lets the police in, and they found her in her bathtub on a tarp. They also found bloody plates, silverware, and pans in her sink. He had cooked and eaten parts of her heart, liver, and brain. He's still waiting for trial in our state, and his interviews and clips of news people questioning him while the police are escorting him to court are just bonkers. He tried to claim demonic possession at one point. He had previously murdered 2 people and been released from prison before moving to our area. Trust your instincts about the people you interact with. People are wild. Let's definitely not meet again. The basement door. My parents live next door to a small red house. Our backyard faces the side of their house, which has a deck and 2 large windows. Around front there were always at least 3 cars parked outside. Oddly enough, in the 10 years I lived there, I never saw anyone enter or leave. Once when I was 12, I saw shadows thrown against the far wall that was visible through one of the windows. When my sister moved out, I took her bedroom, a large, open converted space in the basement, which had a door and an outdoor stairwell which led to the backyard. The door had a small window on it which my sister had covered with a Pulp Fiction poster. I redecorated and replaced the poster with some sheer half curtains. The way the room was set up, if I was lying in bed or sitting on the couch, I was facing the door. When I first moved down there, I noticed that sometimes at night I would hear the sound of leaves crunching in the stairwell. I chalked it up to my cat, who liked to roam the neighborhood. I had no reason to suspect otherwise, until a few weeks later. One night, when my parents were away on business, my boyfriend and I were sitting on the couch smoking. Suddenly he got really stiff and was just staring at the window. I asked him what was wrong and he said, "I just saw camera flash." I kind of just laughed it off and chalked it up to him being high. Who would want a picture of 2 people getting stoned? Still, the seeds of paranoia had been sown, and it wasn't easy to get settled down for sleep that night. I kept looking at the gap between the curtains. There was no light at the bottom of the stairs, so if someone really was down there I'd be none the wiser. At around 3, I heard the distinct sound of leaves under heavy boots. Definitely not a cat. I don't know what made me decide the best course of action was for me, standing all of 5'3", to confront a potential stalker myself. I didn't even put shoes on. I threw the door open. There was no one in the stairwell, so I ran up the stairs and into the backyard. Standing there was a man in his mid-40s, maybe 6 feet tall and wearing one of those mechanic jumpsuits. He was holding a clunky, outdated digital camera. We stood there for a second just looking at each other. He seemed confused to see me. After what felt like an eternity I remembered how to speak. "What the duck are you doing?" My voice seemed to startle him and he immediately turned and ran through my backyard towards the red house and into the dark. After that, I didn't see any strange flashes of light or hear any crunchy leaf noises. It really freaks me out to think how many nights he could have just been standing there in the dark, watching me. Creepy photographer, let's not meet. Almost got my eyes taken. This happened when I was really young on a military base. All my life I thought it was just a weird and terrifying reoccurring dream until I mentioned it to my parents when I was a teenager and they admitted it was completely real. I was playing on a playground and my older sister was around nearby but not playing with me. There was an officer's son by me though, and he started somewhat being nice. I remember him looking at me really close in the face and getting a big smile before he says, "You have really pretty eyes." Now little me is super happy and says, "Thank you, that's nice of you." Probably some vague compliment back. He was only a few years older than me by the looks of it and neither of us were older than 10. He grabs a blunt stick that was laying next to us and pins me to the ground and starts to try gouging my eyes out within seconds, and it's at this point I'm just stupidly staring at him, confused and worried. I'd never encountered violence like this in my life, and before I know it, the kid is holding my scrawny ass down and talking about how he's going to physically take my eyes away from me. It's then I start panicking because can you even take eyes away from people? My sister shoves him off of me and gets me to run with her, away from him, to our house. There wasn't anything we felt we could do when we told our parents because again, it's the officer's son. When I'm a teen and this is all coming to light, they tell me they did talk to the officer. They told him that what his son did was terrible and they didn't want it to happen again. But the dad was pretty entitled about it and we just ended up not going out to play much anymore until that kid moved away. Little psychopath grown up, please let's not meet. You've left many nightmares. Almost abducted. When I was younger, about 8 or 9, my mom would usually drop me and my friends off at a public pool. One of my friends was about 3 years older than me, so I guess my mom thought we'd be safe on our own. One day, me, my friend, her friend, and her friend's older brother decided to go to the public pool with us. My friend's mom dropped us off at the pool this time, and it wasn't the public pool we'd usually go to, but we were familiar with it. When we first entered the pool, we picked out a nice spot for us to sit. It didn't take long until I noticed a man constantly staring at us. I didn't tell my friends at first. I forgot about it and finally got into the pool. We had lots of fun. After spending the whole day at the pool, we decided to leave. My friend called her mom and asked her if she could pick us up. We then grabbed our things and headed towards the entrance. As we were heading towards the entrance, I noticed the man that was staring at us earlier and my heart dropped. He was following us as we made our way towards the pool's entrance. Right when we finally made it, I heard my friend yell. I turned only to see the strange man grabbing her arm. He was trying to drag her along with him, but my friend wouldn't budge. I freaked out and so did my other two friends. We started screaming, shouting for help until two lifeguards came. They pulled the man away and began questioning him. The man then ran away and the staff waited with us until we were picked up. Let's never meet again, sir. Tinder stalker. Like any single 21-year-old, I went on Tinder trying to find my dream guy. Little did I know this would be a big mistake. I came across this guy Scott. I thought he looked like a nice guy, so of course I swiped right. It's a match, yay. I'm not one of those girls that will start the conversation. Too many times I didn't get a reply, so I stopped trying. 2 days go by and I had completely forgot all about my match on Tinder with Scott, until I looked at my phone and saw notification: Scott has sent you a message. I'm not going to lie, I got a little excited and opened it straight away. It was a normal message, and after that we started messaging more and more. He seemed like a really nice guy, a little weird, but hey, people could say that about me. Fast forward a few weeks, and after him asking me numerous times to meet up with him for a drink, I finally felt comfortable enough to agree. That night rolls around and I head to the bar to meet him. I get there before the meeting time of 7 to make sure I can get a drink and before he arrives to settle my nerves. I sat at the bar talking to some random girls that were there as I waited. It got to 7:20 and he still hasn't arrived yet, so I sent him a message. He proceeded to tell me that he was sorry and that he just had to stop by a friend's house and it took longer than expected and that he would be there soon. No big deal, I thought to myself. I'll just have another drink. Finally at 7:45 I get a tap on the shoulder. I turn around to see a man I don't recognize. He tries to hug me and I look at him puzzled, like, who the hell are you? He then told me that he was Scott. He clearly wasn't the guy in the photos that I thought I'd been talking to. He told me that he was really sorry for not telling me that it was in fact photos of his friend that he had used on his Tinder, because he thought no one as pretty as me would give him the time of day if he had posted pictures of himself. At this point I had a few drinks, so I decided to humor the guy and get to know him. I know, huge mistake, and I'm an idiot. Turns out his friend actually told him to use his photos because he thought it would give Scott a chance to meet girls and hopefully they would like him for him and not the photos. The night goes on and we're chatting about small things. Definitely no connection with him, so I decide to call it a night around 10 o'clock. I noticed that he hadn't been drinking at all during the night, a little strange considering he chose this spot. I tell him that I'm going to get a taxi home and he offers to drive me home. I said no. In my mind I didn't want him to get the wrong impression and have to deal with the whole awkward encounter in case he wanted to come into my place. I say bye and walk outside hoping that there would be an available taxi. No such luck. I stood there for another 10 minutes still waiting when Scott suddenly drives around the corner and insists on giving me a lift home. At this point, I was standing outside in the cold, so I decided to accept his ride. I got him to drop me off at the end of my street so he didn't know which house was actually mine. After getting out of the car I started walking and heard him drive off. As I was walking to my front door, I turned around and saw a car in the distance that looked similar to his sitting in a dark alley with its headlights off. I didn't think anything of it and went inside. I went to sleep and woke up in the morning to a bunch of messages from Scott saying how much of a good time he had with me and that he was so glad I could get past the fact that he wasn't the guy in the pictures and that he wanted to see me again. Now I never try and let anyone on, so I replied saying that it was nice to meet him but I don't think that it will go anywhere and we were better off moving on. He clearly didn't get the message because throughout the day he messaged me constantly asking if it was something he did. Like, yeah, dude, you posed as your friend to get a date with me. Anyway, I just ignored his messages and hoped he would get the hint. Later that night I was laying in bed watching TV when I heard a knock at the door. I went downstairs and looked through the peephole and no one was there, so I went to the window in the living room to see if I could get a better view. I noticed that there was a box at the door. I thought to myself that it was a bit creepy, but I hesitantly opened the door and got the box. I went up to my room with it and looked inside. It was photos of me from the night before at the bar, but taken from a perspective where I clearly didn't know someone was taking photos. Obviously I'm freaked out at this point and know that it has to be Scott. He must have followed me home after dropping me off. I heard his car drive off though, so he must have come back. I threw the box away and made sure all the doors and windows were locked. I also made sure to block Scott's number. A few weeks had gone by and nothing eventful had happened, up until yesterday. I was out taking my dog for a walk and noticed that there was a person with a hoodie on following me from quite a distance. I know he was following me because I took all the back little alleys in a random way, not so I was actually going in a particular destination. It makes me wonder if he has been watching me for the last few weeks or if I'm just being paranoid and imagining it. I went to the police and they wrote up a report and I gave them screenshots of the guy's Tinder. They said there wasn't really much they could do because he probably didn't use his real name and they don't have real pictures of him. But if anything else happens, I need to report it to them. They also said that they would send a car to patrol my area a few times a day just to be safe. They also suggested I get someone to stay with me, so my sister and her boyfriend are staying with me for a while until things hopefully settle down. Yes, I know I'm stupid for meeting this guy, but I thought it would be fine meeting in a public place so I don't need the comments about how stupid I was. I'm scared and have learned my lesson and will never be using Tinder again.